Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soap box, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode at the 4th box. We are well over a year into this thing now. Welcome to May. Hard to believe that we've been doing this as long as we have already. And it just seems like every week there is so much to talk about that we barely get to touch on at all. I know, Pops, you're going to have a cheers for us here momentarily, but I'd like to just start by saying that tonight I have a nice glass of wine, which is kind of a weird choice for me. So really mixing it up this week. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and get our cheers kicked off so that I can enjoy a nice sip of this with our fellow patriots joining us here tonight.
Yeah, for sure. And as well as you, I want to thank all those who are joining us. Welcome, friends and patriots. It's always great to have you. And I'm very honored to be here with you, Bree, and with all of our listeners out there. So tonight, as I mentioned back a couple of weeks ago, we are moving away from the winter style lagers and so forth. And today I have from one of my favorite, a Sam Adams Summer Ale. So we're not quite into summer yet, but I'm raising my summer ale tonight in honor of those Pennsylvania Amish especially, and all others who have made a huge effort down there in the western North Carolina and the eastern hills of Tennessee, building homes for those people who were devastated. And I know after the Trump administration took office that there was a lot more relief making its way down there, but it's a great, great story. Pennsylvania Amish and others from around the country down there building homes for the folks that were devastated by the storm.
Yeah.
Secondarily, I wanted to toast our own state senator here in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, who was a favorite of ours, a candidate who ran for governor the last go-around, who is really making a concerted push about the chemtrail thing here in Pennsylvania. So I'm raising my glass, and I hope we can get it posted up on the website where you can watch a little video clip that he put out, I believe, on Tuesday. So here's to those two, both Senator Mastriano and, of course, all those down helping out in Western Carolina, Tennessee. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Two very different fights, but equally important.
Well, you know, it was late. It was late when I watched Senator Mastriano's piece, and I thought that's such a good thing, something we haven't really spent a lot of time on. We've touched on from time to time, but I really like anybody that stands up in opposition to this sort of thing, and it's really not being hidden anymore. And yeah. I think as we pointed out with some family and loved ones over in Italy, anytime you see a picture of the sky, there's none of that stuff evident.
Yeah.
When here in this country, almost every time you take a picture of the sky, you will see either contrails or chemtrails. And as Senator Mastriano points out in his little clip, if it's there more than 30 or 40 seconds, it's a chemtrail because the contrails dissipate and melt back off. It's just frozen particles from the hot, jet engine. So
right.
Anyway, we certainly appreciate his effort in bringing that to the public's attention. So for my quote tonight, as I mentioned back a couple of sessions ago, I found a whole list of Paul Revere stuff that I just thought was fantastic, and I had not run into a lot of it before. So this one comes from Paul Revere as well, and he says, "Preparedness is the price of freedom. We must always be ready to defend it." And I wish I would have found that when we were doing our Preparedness 101 sessions. I thought that really would have fit in well, but I think it still does, fit in with all of our underlying themes is we need to be prepared, we need to be involved. So other than that, I wanted to talk, Bree, a little bit about how we lost our republic. And first of all, I think it's important, and most listeners probably on this show recognize that we are a republic. We were intended to be a republic. All of the talking heads and all the politicians that use the term democracy are doing that on purpose. That's to condition us into believing that that's what we are. But truthfully, we're even removed from being a democracy anymore. But we were never intended to be. So the form of government
Well,
that we were.
and maybe this is where you're about to go, but before you dive into how we lost all of this,
Yep.
because we always have listeners coming and going, and we have new people popping in all the time. Can you remind us? A lot of people haven't really thought about these terms since elementary or middle school. Can you remind us, like, what is the importance of the difference between those things? Like, why is it important that we remember that we're a republic, and why is that different from a democracy?
Well, sure. And the big thing for us is not only are a republic, meaning the governing goes on in the eyes of the public, but we are a constitutional republic, meaning all law emanates back to the Constitution. That is the supreme law of the land. And I don't think anybody has to look very far today, if you've read your Constitution, to recognize that we're way out of bounds. So we're not a republic, and we're certainly not a constitutional republic, where the flip side of it, a democracy, one of the terms I heard long, long ago when I first started getting into this, what we would call a fight against tyranny, is a democracy is simply two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. That means the minority is always going to lose. So all this government has to do, and some of our founders made notes such as, the republic will last until the people recognize they can vote themselves gifts from the public treasury, and then they will always elect the candidates who promise the most gifts. So then once you've created this majority and you go by majority rules, two wolves are deciding what they're going to have for dinner, two wolves and a sheep, guess what? The sheep always loses. And one of the things I always try to explain when we talk about a constitutional republic or a democracy, the republic is set up to be based on the rule of law, and that's the Constitution. And basically what it was to do, and government was to do, was to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are God-given rights that we as individuals all possess inherently.
Yeah.
No person, man or woman, or majority of persons can give or take them from you. Those are gifts. And if there is somebody taking those from you or attempting to take those from you, to me, that is the basis of tyranny. So, since the constitutional republic is set up to protect the minority, what is the smallest minority? The smallest minority is we, the individual. And if you go back to the Declaration, governments were instituted amongst men to protect individual rights. And those two pieces, founding documents, are interlocked and work together to protect individual rights. Mm-hmm. When you go to a democracy, it's mob rule. It's mob rights. Whoever has the biggest crowd wins. It's like a street fight. If you have 100 and I have 10, guess what? You're probably going to win. That is not the way government was supposed to work. Just because you have the greatest mob or the biggest percentage, it's supposed to go back to the rule of law. And to your point leading into this, I think that's why they don't teach the Constitution in school. They don't teach you that is the basis of all law. When you hear Congress and senators talking about something that there is no federal authority for, remember, there's only 18 that are clearly spelled out in Article 1, Section 8, authorities. And it mainly has to do with securing the border, providing a sound currency, providing for a military, post office, roads, and a few of those things. And that is it. All the rest of this stuff that they're involved with is stuff that we let them take away from us and take away from our states. Yeah. So I hope I didn't get too far off in the weeds on that. But really, and I think the more they hammer out democracy, democracy, democracy. You hear it all the time, everywhere you turn, even from the Republicans.
Right.
But basically, they're all on the same team. And this is one of the hard nuts we have to crack, is trying to get people to understand that the long-term serving Republicans are just as bad as the other guys. They're all in it together. They have all violated their oath to the Constitution, and we are no longer operating as that. And so tonight, I think your question was a good lead in. What I wanted to talk about was some things that I found over the last week doing some research that I think were significant contributors to us losing our republic. And we can pick those apart as we go through, but I really like to hear what you think about the Republican or the Republic and the Democrat or democracy basis of government, forms of government.
Well, maybe this isn't quite an answer to your question, but the first thing that popped into my mind was, as you were explaining these things, and it's not something I've never heard before, right? Of course, but I know that a lot of people have never heard it, literally. I mean, or they've heard it one time, and it was in, 6th grade, and they took their little test on it at the end of the week, and they never, ever, ever had it come up again. And they don't say, oh, what is a republic? Because to your point, no one on the Democratic side or the Republican side is saying the word. So they're not saying, what is that? Because nobody's talking about it on any side. So I do think you're right that I think it's been conditioned out of us on such a grand scale that how do you wake up enough people to start even thinking that we're different than what we've become? I mean, you said it yourself. We lost the republic a long time ago. So why are people going to start even latching themselves onto something that hasn't existed in their lifetime? I mean, how do we even do that? But the point, coming back to my original thought here, that I immediately had in my mind was like, isn't it kind of silly that we all always say, you got to get out and vote. You got to get out and vote. You got to do it, or you can't complain. Everybody has their reason. You got to get out and vote. You have to be part of the system in that way. And it's kind of like, but you don't even know what kind of government we are, or we're meant to have. So we're encouraging all of these people to go participate in a system that is part of a government that we're not even meant to have here. So why are we telling all of these people who don't even know what type of government we're supposed to be living in to contribute to that type of government? Like, it just, and we were one of those groups not that long ago, going into election season, you got to get out and vote, you got to show up. And I know we were talking to our listeners and the ones that, were on that shared our mindset. I know that we were doing that, but that's where my head immediately goes. Like, to me, so much of the problem that we have, so much of all of the problems that we have that have led to the overarching issue in this country is that there is such a lack of education, and we, the people, are just simply not informed the way that we should be. Like, we want a more involved people, but we can't ask people who know nothing to be informed. We can't ask people that do not have the right background to get up and stand for this because they have no foundation. There is no basis. Why get up and stand against tyranny when you don't even really understand what tyranny is, and you certainly don't know what a republic is? Okay, yeah, there's tyrants in our republic. Well, what's a republic? Like, if you can't answer that, then of course you're not in the fight. So getting people involved in this is so much bigger of an issue than I think we oftentimes recognize that it is, because the problem is a lot more foundational. Like, it's level 1, and we're talking about level 10, level 15 stuff. There's all these problems going on way up here. But if you haven't figured out level 1 yet, like, you can't solve those problems. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it just, when we have these conversations, it just becomes so, like, glaring that it's almost like not fixable.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points there, And the first one, I think we kind of touched on it, maybe last week with the sheriff or the week before. But you had pointed out, and this is part of it. Most people don't even believe or recognize that we're not free. They
Yeah.
simply don't believe it. They think they're free because somebody told them they're free. They have no context to compare it to. Like the book says, freedom, true liberty, is the ability to do anything you want, without anybody interfering or telling you can't, up until the point that you infringe on somebody else's right to do anything they want. That means all the permits that you have in your in your wallet, in your office at work, in anything that you do, you have to have a. None of that would exist if you were truly free. None of that would exist. But we are so conditioned because we've had it drilled into our head that we are the freest country on earth. And we grew up believing that. Nobody has any context to compare it to. But I just think any time that you have to do something for somebody that doesn't involve you receiving compensation for it, you are complying with the wishes of another, which means you are not free. And we are not free. And your other point that is worth spending a little time talking on, I think, and you're right, we have encouraged voting, and I encourage participation.
Yeah.
That means, as we'll discuss here, hopefully later on as we get into this tonight, that means that if you are voting and you think, therefore, that you have done your civic duty, you are so far off, and you are part of the problem. If the only thing that you do is vote, and you believe you're politically engaged because you vote, if you don't know anything about the Constitution, if you don't know anything about the Declaration, if you don't do any community volunteering, if you don't contact your elected officials at local, state, or federal level, if you don't participate in town hall meetings, guess what? You are one of the huge percentage that thinks because they went and cast a vote, it's laziness. They believe that they have participated in the system. That is so far from the truth. And as I think you were alluding to, if that's all the more you're going to participate, or if that's all the more you're going to understand, we're better off if you did not vote.
Well, yeah, and then that's the tough thing in my head. It's like a double-edged sword because you want everyone to be engaged and to get up and do their part and to have a voice and to vote. But if your voice is based on nothing and there's no thought process behind it and you don't even know why you're showing up and you're not doing all of those things, it's unfortunate because there are so many people who are doing those things, who are so committed, who spend so much of their time like trying to really make their community, their state a better place, their nation a better place. And that person's vote and your vote as someone who doesn't care, it counts the
Right.
same. It counts.
Yeah.
It all equals the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're doing everything or you're doing nothing. It counts for the same thing, and it's like, that's really frustrating. Like, if everyone gets to vote, we should have to like have a little bit more background information to vote off of. And I know we're tangenting like hard here. We're really kind of going a little bit off, but these are the things that I'm like, yeah, like this is part of the problem.
Actually, I think this ties in perfectly with where I wanted to try and take the conversation tonight, because we have lost our republic. And let us not kid each other. It's gone. The republic does not exist. I don't even think we have a democracy. We
Yeah.
have a military industrial, big pharma, big media, in cahoots with government, oligarchy that tells us how to live our life. They steal from the many and provide for the few through lots of different things that are manipulated by this group, and that includes COVID and COVID vaccines and public education and war, never-ending wars and acts of terrorism in this country. These are all things that the government had something to do with or behind the scenes was involved with, and it's intended to keep us enslaved. And one of the things that I wanted to get into tonight was how did we allow ourselves to do that? And your point about uneducated voters, this is what they're counting on. Everybody gets to run out of there with their sticker on and they put it on their shirt or they put it on their phone or they put it on their briefcase. I voted, but they know nothing. They know nothing about the candidates. They know nothing about the rule of law, and that starts with the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution, and your state constitution. They know nothing about them things, but they get to run around with their I voted sticker on, I participated, and that is the end of their political involvement. That is a problem. It is a huge problem.
Yeah.
And one of the topics that I wanted to steer this conversation into tonight, because if we know nothing about how it's supposed to work, how are we ever expected to hold accountable the people that we send to office? We simply are not, and we have not for over 100 years. So to go further, unless you had some more, and I hope you had some addition to add to that, but that's kind of where I don't believe voting works.
Yeah.
Even though we have supported the people to get out and vote, but you got to understand who you're voting for and how the system's supposed to work, or you're just casting your vote because you're a generational Republican or you're a generational Democrat, or maybe if you really, really are feeling like a rogue, maybe you vote for an independent or somebody that's not one of the two major candidates. But you still don't, most people don't understand what the candidates stand for or how government's supposed to work.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to go back to. Like the point that you made just a few moments ago is uneducated voters is literally what they bank on. Both sides. Like that's what they want, because that's when they get to say we are a democracy. And to your point, we're not even, it's not that we're not just a republic, we're not even a democracy anymore. But because everyone's out here with their I voted sticker on, they get to say we're a democracy. See, everybody voted, they did it. And it's like, that's your ideal situation if you're a career politician, because you know that they're going to show up and they're going to cast a ballot and you get to trick them into thinking they did the best thing for their country. Meanwhile, they're never going to show up, like you said, to hold that person accountable. So you don't have to worry about it as a career politician. That's exactly like your ideal person, an uneducated voter. That's insane.
Yeah. And another way that you can tell it doesn't work, if the overall approval rating of Congress is something below 30%, sometimes it's down around 10 or 12%, but we put the same people back in office, you know the system's broke. Voting doesn't work. If the overall aggregate is Congress is broken and they have a 10 or 12 or 15% approval rating, but we turn around and elect the same people, you know that the system is broken. They've corrupted it to work for them. And we are never going to fix this at the ballot box, talking about the 4 boxes. The ballot box has been compromised. And the other way it's been compromised, we've talked about other times on this show. If you create a huge demographic of people who one or more of life-sustaining needs are supplied by government, guess what? They are never, ever going to vote for somebody that's going to take it away. Guess what? They're going to stand in the streets and protest when DOJ starts finding all this waste and fraud and abuse and starts cutting the programs that provide it. That is where the political energy comes behind those that have provided these socialistic programs. Mm-hmm. And guess what? That is who they're going to vote for. Just like Alex de Couville stated, very similar to what some of Thomas Jefferson and others said, that the American Republic will endure until the day Congress discovers that it can bribe the public with the public's money. All they got to do is give back. We stole money from you, and we give you back something. And guess what? You will forever vote for that candidate or that office holder that does that. Yeah. And we've been in that pattern for over 100 years. That's why the system is irreparably broken. We are not a constitutional republic. I don't even think we're a democracy.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into that. You had several points you wanted to touch on tonight to talk about why you really believe that that's true. So let's start diving into those.
Okay, so the big article, and I sent this around to a lot of our email list, And I took this article off of the Awakening Front. It is called Bread and Circuses: How Distractions Enable Tyranny in Modern Society. So, much like in Roman times, we have the gifts to hand out, regress from the public treasury, as I just mentioned. We got welfare, we got medical cards, we got free phones, we got housing, we got everything. So if you create a large pool of people that use that, you have created a large group of voters.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the distraction. We got all the bullshit stuff coming out of Hollywood. We have all the sporting events. I was sick to my stomach the other night. Went out for a beer, which I do on occasion, and guess what? It's NFL draft night. Okay, NFL draft night. This is a big deal, I guess. I'm not into it, but I'm sitting out in a bar, and there are grown adults with somebody else's name on a football jersey of one team or another, and they're watching the NFL draft as if their mother's life depended on it. And they're jumping up and down and they're cheering for their team when they make a pick. Look at Lambeau Field up there. It was full. It was full of people that were there to watch the NFL draft. Talk about bread and circuses. Folks, if you are into that and you cannot say what the three branches of government are, if you cannot say what the Constitution gives you in terms of your rights, if you cannot tell me what the Declaration of Independence was intended to do for us, but you can tell who everybody on your favorite football team, baseball team, hockey team, I don't care what. Guess what? That is the bread and circuses employed by those in office to keep the American public dumbed down, uninvolved, and looking at all the wrong stuff.
Yeah.
And I know maybe I'm going to burn somebody's ass tonight. Guess what? I don't care. We are not paying attention to the criminals that have stolen from me for all of my life, and they're stealing from your generation now, and they're peddling back some crumbs to you, enough to keep the general public distracted and watching football games and baseball games instead. This is pathetic. Albert Einstein said it, and I'm not going to have the exact words for it, but he said every single one of us has to be involved with defending the rights that are provided and guarded in the Constitution, or guess what? You're not going to have them. Well, how many people can say that they did their part defending those rights?
Yeah.
1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000? I don't know. Not very many. That's why we don't have it. So bread and circuses, and I did send that article out. It was found on the Awakening Front. If anybody wants to go on, it's a great article about how tyranny can exist today through the application of bread and circuses. They keep us distracted. We're focused on all kind of nonsense, which means nothing. It means nothing to you. But what those criminals in office are doing means everything to you. It means everything to your offspring and your future offspring beyond that, generations down the line. And we're too busy paying attention to Hollywood crap and football games.
Yeah.
It's absolutely maddening to me.
I mean,
I hope you have some comment.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that, look, I've got no beef with people like gravitating towards other things. If you recognize how absolutely catastrophically screwed up our shit is here as a country. And if for some people that's too much and you have to turn to other things to get your mind off of it, I get that. And that's fine. Because not every single person has the mindset to be engaged with this all the time, because it's a mess. And it can really, really like bring you down emotionally and mentally if you let it. So using things as an outlet, that's not an issue. Like, I'm not knocking that person. But I think the people you're speaking about are not those people. They're people that are like fully 1000% into these other things and don't even think once about any of the bigger picture stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If you're a single person and you're a selfish person and you don't care what happens to anyone that you love and anyone that is younger than you, whether it is a relative of yours or not, fine. You know what? Fine. That's your lot in life. You're not going to think about anyone other than yourself. Fine. But if you have children, if you have nieces and nephews, if you have anyone that you care about and what their future looks like, the fact that you can sit by and just let it happen and not even ask what's going on and why are people upset, like that is the issue. There's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be some people who like mentally just can't be with it for one reason or another, or who choose to like understand that it's there but need an outlet type of thing. Those people are always going to exist, but like for the people who know that it exists and just are like straight up like not my problem, that's why we're here. And I don't think we're going to change anybody's minds in that, but like we have to understand that like all of these distractions, like you kind of hinted at there, are orchestrated and they've been going on for a very, very long time. And like bread and circuses is not a new concept. The reason that that sounds antiquated is because it is. It's a very, very old way to trick people into stupidity and to trick people into not looking at what is going on. Like it's a tale as old as time, which is
That's
why it still works.
that's precisely correct. I have friends, and they are friends, and they will sit around on a Saturday or Sunday, a day that they're normally not working, and they'll watch a golf match. A freaking golf match. Are you shitting me? You could sit all afternoon, beautiful sunny Saturday afternoon here in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and you'll sit and watch golf on TV. But you've never gone to a city council meeting, you've never gone to a county commissioner meeting. You may have voted, so again, you're off the hook because you participated, but you don't know who your state rep is, you don't know who your state senator is, you probably don't know who your governor is. You know that Trump sucks because the television told you so. This is a problem. And I'm just pointing out, and I have friends like this. They are friends. But it's disheartening to think that even people who I associate with on a friendship level have absolutely zero understanding of what we lost, and the only chance we have to get it back is themselves in the mirror when they look. And that is it's troubling, and it's part of the big nut we have to crack as we talked with the sheriff last week. I think the whole thing is messaging. How do we get people to understand that everything has been stolen away from us? Our freedom, that's everything. It's been stolen away. So that was my first point for tonight, was bread and circuses. And the article was very well written, How Distractions Enable Tyranny in Modern Society. And it has to do with all this other junk they keep us focused on. My next point, if you care, if I move on, was an article that I found on the Atlantic, and I just really like to throw out some of these publications because there's a wide ranging in their philosophical backgrounds and which way they're leaning politically. From the Atlantic, I found an article that said only 1% of Americans are really politically active. And it goes on to say in that article that just 12% of Americans engaged in more than 3 activities very often. And they consider an activity community volunteering, writing letters, calling commissioners, voting, all of these things they consider to be, in this article, a part of being politically active. Like sharing a conversation with somebody else about issues of today. They consider that so only 12% are involved on a regular basis, according to this article published in the Atlantic. Well, guess what? If only 10% or 12% are actually active in any of these activities that they consider to be political, then why is it difficult, and I guess it is for me, to understand that we've morphed into a democracy or an oligarchy run by the big military industrial complex, the big pharma, the big media, all of these things that we've talked about many times? Well, because there's only a handful of us that do anything
Yeah.
other than vote. To go back to the point that we were having early on tonight, when we're talking about everybody goes out and they get their sticker and they really feel good about themselves. I voted, everybody's patting me on the ass. I did my civic duty, I'm politically involved, but they know nothing. And they're not going to do another thing until the next election cycle. And not only that, but many of them only vote in a presidential election.
Right.
All the midterm stuff where you can really put changes into place at Congress or in the Senate. Most of them don't. If it's a presidential election, many of them will get up and vote. But that may be the only way. They don't vote in a lot of local stuff. They don't vote in a lot of state stuff. And we have such a small percentage that participate in any of the broad swath of activities that they consider to be politically active. And that means even volunteering in your local community. Very, very small percentage. And that's why we have a bullshit government that's nothing like it was supposed to be.
Well, the reason for that is our education system. And I know this is one you're going to get to, so maybe you skip to this next, because that would be a good segue. But I believe the reason for those things is because we do not have any critical thinking ability whatsoever as a nation, like on a nationwide scale. We know that this was the plan for decades and decades to turn us into a nation of workers. We know this, like this exists for a very, very long time. This is not a secret or a conspiracy. This is what our entire education system is built upon. And because of that, you learn these very minuscule details in your history classes, in your social studies classes when you're young. And they tell you, all you have to do is go vote. And like, you did really good. You get to give yourself a high five because good job, little buddy, you did it. And that's really just what they tell us. And your parents learned the same thing. So the people that you learn from, your parents and your teachers, they're all telling you that this is all there is to it. And you never learned the whole Constitution, and you never really learned what freedom was meant to be. And you never really learned how to keep a republic in place, or that we could really, really easily lose a republic if we weren't paying attention. You never learned any of those things. You just learned this is kind of our background. And most of the stuff in the history books is pretty much falsified anyway. We just made it sound good so that we look good, and just show up and vote. And that's it. And that's why only 1% of people are active and engaged at all, because most people genuinely believe they're doing their best and they believe they're doing the right thing. And that's the issue. It's like, and that's why I don't like coming after people and being like, you watch football and you don't care about politics. Because it's like, you don't know any better. And it's not your fault, because no one around you in your entire life ever told you had to care more than you do right now. You think you're doing what you're supposed to do. Like, you think you're doing the best that you can for your country. And so, like, to me, I can't really get that angry at people, because I understand that, like, everything that is the way that it is right now it was all done on purpose. Like, it's going perfectly to plan. And we're right where we're supposed to be in the eyes of the people that set it up, including those who constructed our education system. So I don't, you can't take someone who's 40, 50, 60 years old and say, hey, everything you've known for the last entirety of your life was actually bullshit. And like, here's why. Because you're not going to change their minds. What has to happen is what I think is happening. Like, we have a ton of people that are moving into homeschooling situations because people are recognizing that problem. So I think the shift, we're there already. Like, we're already at that. I would almost say that we're over that crux, and we're going back the other way to where people are recognizing that critical thinking has been pulled out of us as a society. And now we have to go out of our way to make sure that that exists once again in this next generation, these up and coming generations. So I think that change is already happening. We just have to wait for these people to get older, to get to the point that they are voting, to get to the point that they are making decisions and have a chance to be engaged. So I think we're there. Like, I think we're right on the cusp. But the problem that we're dealing with right now is that we're kind of in this standstill because everyone who is of this age right now is either, already like in their 40s, 50s, whatever, and thinking they're doing the right thing. Or let's say they're the first, like the generation right now who's kind of just coming into voting. You have 18 through, let's say, 26 years old. Well, most of those people are completely indoctrinated by social media and liberal tactics, which are teaching them that everyone should be transgender and queer. And if you're not one of those things, then you better hope that you're mentally handicapped in some way, because if you're not part of a minority, it doesn't matter which one, then you're a problem and you're privileged and your opinion doesn't matter. So that's in the mindset of the people who are like the current generation. You know what I mean? So we're looking to that next group down. Like it's the people who are not of voting age yet. Like that's where the hope is, I think. Like we talk about, the younger generation. I think like the youngest generation is our only hope right now, because that shift, I think, is happening. And maybe
Well,
I'm being optimistic, but that's my view on it.
well, one of the things I really think is great about our little effort here, our little podcast, is the difference in age that we have and the perspective that you bring. And oftentimes you bring hope to what I have viewed as dire and dour circumstances, and you're recognizing that people through homeschooling or otherwise are largely starting to recognize that the big media has bullshitted us, the big pharma has drugged us, the government has lied to us, they've sent our children off to wars that were unnecessary. There's a lot of bad things by people in high places, and you're indicating that you feel there's a swell of younger people that are starting to recognize this and take steps to mitigate it, because being a little bit older and further down the path, it looks to me like I'm running out of time to make a difference here. And if the difference is already made and there's younger people coming up and becoming of voting age and becoming of child rearing age or becoming of adult decision ages where they can influence where this country is going, starting in their communities and otherwise, it is hopeful, and it brings a lot of perspective to this conversation, because since we are talking about education, my generation, the generation before me, probably the generation before that, has all been influenced by the mind control propaganda conditioning that the schoolhouses are, as you pointed out, as John Rockefeller said way back in the early 1900s, that he didn't want a society of thinkers. He wanted a society of workers, and he was largely had his thumbprints all over the development of the U.S. education system. And that is where we were learning people, teaching people how to recite what they needed to so they could get out and they could perform the task that the super wealthy wanted us to be performing. And it worked. People's wealth went up and the country grew and all of those things. But along the way, we lost freedoms. Every generation has lost freedoms, and we've been conditioned to believe that we are free and that we have the greatest this, we have the greatest that, we have the greatest education system, we have the greatest medical system, we have the greatest infrastructure, we have the greatest military, and it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. So if people are recognizing, younger people in particular, because energy comes from younger folks, and I'm talking 30, 35 and down, they are the ones that are recognizing the conditions that they're living in or what their kids are going to be faced with challenges, and they want to put energy into changing things to make things better for their kids. My whole effort in this arena that I've been involved with as long as you can remember is for that same purpose, and I've been in this a very long time. It was because I am terrified of what you kids are going to be left with. Well, your generation, as you bring kids into the world, you are going to feel that same thing. And if there are more of you guys awake to that, you have a much better chance of changing the direction, the trajectory that we're on. And that's hopeful.
I really do believe that. Like, I really think that there's such a shift in that sense. We talked a little bit about how there feels to be a spiritual awakening last week with Sheriff Mack. I think that's true, and that plays a big part in this. I think there's a lot of people that, like, so much bad has happened, and even though there are plenty of people not paying attention. There are more people than ever who are.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, the Republic, as I don't want to say knew it, but as they knew it, as our founding fathers knew it, is gone. But I
Mm-hmm.
think there is a revival of people in this country who want to see it back.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go too far down another tangent here, I think you had a point about the education system you wanted to bring up. So I'll let you get into that before we move into the next one.
Yeah, and I think we largely touched on it that the education system was never intended, truthfully, before the John Rockefeller influences and all that, to be conditioning us to think about accepting transgenderism and all the queer stuff and furries in the classroom. We have gotten so far off track, and the education system promotes that. And the whole idea of a Department of Education from the federal level is unconstitutional at its basis. So we need to get back to small neighborhood schoolhouses where the people in that neighborhood influence what's going on in that schoolhouse instead of our corporate masters in Washington, D.C. and their puppets that are sitting in elected office are telling us what we have to do through the Department of Education in our schoolhouses. And for quite a bit of the early goings here under the Trump administration, there was some discussions about dismantling that thing. And I think they're making headway in to try and get it back on track. But I think a complete shutting down of an unconstitutional agency such as Department of Education is really what's warranted, because the conditioning, you might recall during the Obama years, one of the things that Michelle Obama was big, it was one of her big pet projects, was the school lunch program. And they were basically telling kids that you could not bring into school without the schoolhouse inspecting what you were carrying into your lunch. This is so far out of control. This is communism. This is Nazi Germany stuff. A parent wants to send something in the school with their child for their lunch. The school has absolutely no right, responsibility, or otherwise to be nib shitting with what a parent decides to send with their kid to school. But you know what? I went to school board meetings over that stuff, and we knelt down. We knelt down like a herd of sheep. You know why? Because that school was going to lose 2 or 3% funding that come from the federal government, and they were willing to bend over backwards and allow themselves to be dictated to from on high, and they tolerated it like a bunch of cowards. And that's where I get revved up.
Yeah.
Because people in my generation folded up like a cheap suit and did not stand up and fight for their rights or their child rights, and that drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my thing about failing education. We get all kind of mush pounded into our heads. It's mind control, it's propaganda, and the Department of Education at federal level has absolutely no business. There's no constitutional authority, and it shouldn't exist.
Yeah, for sure. All right,
So,
I won't dive into that more than I already have, so I'll let you move right to the next point.
So the next point I had, and this is kind of unambiguous, or it's not quite as clear, but the article that I found on this for this topic come off of LouRockwell.com, and I like a lot of stuff. There's a lot of good authors that put stuff up on Lou Rockwell, and this was from Lou, and it said, drugged into oblivion, more than 60% of U.S. adults admit that they are taking pharmaceutical drugs. Now, there is $15 billion a year spent on pharmaceutical advertisements, probably during football games. So here we are getting mush pounded into our head with advertisements during this mush being pounded into our heads about pharmaceutical drugs. And there's huge percentages of people that take 3 and 4 pharmaceutical drugs a day. We take more than all the rest of the world. And I'm thinking about this. So we know that Big Pharma is evil. I think almost anybody that has any ability to critically analyze what's going on in the world can say that Big Pharma is not looking out for our best interest or our best health. They are looking out to pad their shareholders' wallets and bring money in. That's their main objective. There's no question about it. And we are tolerating a system that is spending $15 billion a year on telling you what kind of drugs you should be taking if your leg twitches or whatever all this nonsense is. Kids are being drugged from the time they're in first and second grade because maybe they're a little bit rowdy. We used to go home and get a boot up our ass and have to go work in the garden for an hour or two if we missed a behaving school. Today, we simply go to the doctor and get them a handful of drugs, and we prescribing drugs to kids in grade school, and now wonder why they're sitting there in a stupor, unable to absorb what the limp Department of Education is trying to pour. This system is it feeds off of itself.
Yeah.
And this article on Lou Rockwell, I'm just going to give you a couple of things that it said. Americans watch more television than anyone else in the world. And as we watch television, we are constantly being bombarded by commercials from pharmaceutical companies. No wonder why we take more than everybody else. As discussed in a previous article, pharmaceutical companies spend more than $15 billion a year on television advertising, just television advertising. The reason they do this is because it works. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't be spending them advertising dollars if they weren't talking people into going out and getting a handful of drugs. And the whole adult population, more than half, are influenced by pharmaceutical drugs. So if we wonder why people are lazy, if we wonder why people aren't going outside, getting exercise and paying attention to raising their children and doing wholesome things, could it be? Could it be because we're all a bunch of zombies whacked out on something that the Big Pharma decided to put into us? Yeah. Could it be that the super high rates of autism are attributable to drugs that are being pumped into our kids from the time they're a month old? Could it be that the diabetes, juvenile diabetes, super high rates of diabetes in this country is because we're so lazy, we can't get up off the couch, we're sitting there absorbing the mind control that's being poured into our heads from video games and all the rest of it. This stuff is all working together to make us docile sheep that don't even see the pen that we're standing in. This is how we lost our republic.
Yeah.
Bred in circuses, education system that don't educate, it propagandizes. People are over-drugged in this country more than everybody else in the world. We're just drugged. We're walking around in a stupor. This is how we lost our republic, because all of these things have been allowed to happen or have been coerced into happening, coaxed into happening over the last 50 and 100 years. And we are so far removed from having our republic. And it has to do with these sort of things. Yeah. Education system, population is drugged. 1% participate, probably because of the two other things, because they're not educated about how they should be, and they're drugged up.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at it like that, in such a simple, broken down format, it should be so clear that this is all by design. It should be so clear. But because of those things, the critical thinking is not there. So ignorance persists. And that is why there are so many people who are reacting to headline news still in the legacy media. Because if those other things didn't exist, if they had any critical thinking whatsoever, if they weren't on drugs that were paid for by their government, if they weren't feeling like they had no choice but to continue voting in those same people because their drugs and everything else are being paid for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If all those things were not happening, then they would look at any of these headlines that we see blowing up every single day and they would go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Like it simply is not hard to follow. It is not hard to understand. And I think that's why so many people have woken up to it, because there are still enough people who aren't entrenched by those other issues. And the headlines have become so aggressively opposed to like reality that people are questioning it that have never questioned it previously. So I think that's good. I mean, obviously the issue with all of these things that are ongoing, that are not new issues, that have been going on for decades and decades, that have gotten us to this point, that have destroyed our republic, they are all, the mission of all of them is furthered by the media. which is not just, as you've said so many times, the propaganda arm of the radical left or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also the piece of all of those other units that we've connected here. You know, the big pharma, the big
Mm-hmm.
education, the military industrial complex. It's the one piece that they all turn to say, hey, you do marketing. What is marketing? Marketing spins something that is ugly and nasty into something that people want to know more about. So that's what the legacy media is. They
Mm-hmm.
say, here's all these terrible, terrible things. We're going to sell them to you. And we're going to do it by tricking you into literally anything that will convince you to move the way we want you to move. All we have to do is create, a boogeyman, create something scary, create a disease, create a guy for you to hate. Like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they have to do. They create the problem and they create the solution at the same time. And when you go along with the solution they provide to you, you are falling for manipulation. Like every single time. If someone is telling you how to react and you react the way they tell you to, you're literally playing into their hand. So until
Yep.
you wake up to that and recognize that you have to go against the people that are these corporations that you claim to hate and these money making rackets that you claim to hate, until you go against exactly what they tell you to do, you are perpetuating the problem. You are perpetuating the destruction of not just the republic, but of freedom of America.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I bring this up is because I had all of these headlines in mind that I kind of wanted to bring up and be like, here's what the legacy media says, but here's what's reality. And at this point, we're already like an hour in, so I don't even know if it's worth going into some of those things. But
Mm-hmm.
the one thing I would say on it is that there are still so many people who hate Trump just because the media is telling them to. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sitting here defending Trump. That's
Mm-hmm.
not what I'm looking to do right in this moment. What I'm saying is that there are a ton of people. You're still the minority, by the way. Let's not forget how the vote happened and how that all looked.
Mm-hmm.
But the loudest people are still screaming about Trump and everyone in his administration. And
Mm-hmm.
here's what I would say to them. If you had any sense, if you had any ability to create logic of your own without being manipulated by a system, you would still hate him. But it would be for a different reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I know you're a liar. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I know you're not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Because the question isn't, why is Elon Musk in there making these decisions? Why is Doge destroying democracy? The question is, why did these things happen? And why did these truths come out? And yet no one's been arrested.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should be mad about.
Exactly.
But you're not, because you're not paying attention. Because
Right.
you let them allow you to be stupid.
Mm-hmm. That's it's so evident, and I run into it everywhere I go. You run into a friend here or there, and they talk just as you described. That you know that their television has conditioned them or told them that they're supposed to hate Trump. But if you ask them what it is, there is no substance behind their position. It's just that they were told to hate Trump. He's a son of a bitch, this and that. But they do not have, as you point out, we, those who are hoping to restore the republic, were hopeful that we were going to tear down unconstitutional things that have popped up over many decades. And there was some indication that some of that was happening, and there was a little bit. But to your point, none of this stuff has come to fruition. Like Sheriff said last week, what happened to the Fort Knox gold? By now, this was 2 months ago. This was mentioned. We're going to do an audit on Fort Knox. By now, we should know. What happened to the Jeffrey Epstein files? What happened to the Seth Rich story? What happened to Martin Luther King and the Kennedys and all these stories that were supposed to come out? It's one excuse after another. So you recognize then, even though there may be people that we considered were going in there with the best of intentions to really reveal they're all under the influence. We're
Yeah.
not getting done. We're still not getting the answers. And the real trouble is, even though there are people who claim they want to stick up for the Constitution and they want what they want is they want to cheer for either the red team or the blue team. And there's, well, our guy's in there, so we got to be happy with the answers. No, we don't have the answers yet.
Right.
We should not be happy, and nobody should be satisfied, and very few people are unhappy. Hey, our guy's in there, just like voting. I did my job. I'm going home and I'm turning the football game on, or I'm turning on, Desperate Housewives because I did my job. No, the job is not done. We reached the starting line, like we said way back in the beginning. We just got to the starting line, and if the political energy goes out behind those that appear to be in there willing to do some change, guess what? Nothing gets done.
Exactly.
And so far, we're seeing a lot of that.
Go ahead. No, you go.
I think you had a good point. I could see it in your face. You had another thing you wanted to say, so I'm going to hold up for a second.
All right. I have the floor still. Well, what I was going to say was, imagine how powerful we would become if we let these manipulated differences fall aside and recognize that the problem is the same. And that's why I said, I know that you don't know what you're talking about. I know that there's no logic in what you're saying, because if you did, we would come together and say, okay, we both disagree that Trump is doing the wrong thing. Because blue team tells you should be mad about this, and red team tells you should be mad about this, you're not working together to say the problem is the same. It's the same problem. Like, It just makes me so mad. And that's the other thing, like, the environmental stuff. You have all these environmentalists that are like, oh, well, Trump's cutting funding to the national parks and he's opening up certain, areas that were previously restricted to mining and fishing and this and that. And the climate. It's like, for us, I want to know why there's $66 million being spent on apparently them dimming the sun, which, by the way, is already happening. It's the chemtrail thing. Like, this is not new, but they're going to do it on a bigger scale. Dimming the sun. Do you have any idea how that's going to affect the climate? You want to talk about, like, the environment and the impact of humans on the environment? Okay, maybe the problem that you think exists and the problem that I think exists are not the same, but the people causing the problem are the same people. Let's just link up for like 5 seconds. Let's set our differences aside and get mad at the same person, the same group, and like watch what could happen. Just
amen. We've been saying that. I've been writing about that for decades now, that we have to quit doing this. They are manipulating these feuds between Republicans, Democrats, black, white, straight, gay, secular, religious. They have manipulated that to keep us like this instead of looking at them. Yeah. At them is the problem. And it's not our elected officials. They are only doing what their handlers are telling them to do. Exactly. The real beneficiaries behind the scenes are the global elites who are making millions and billions, taking from the many and giving to the few, and those puppets in office are carrying out their wishes. But I want to go back to your comment about the chemtrails. You know why that's a big issue now? Because people are waking up to it. So now what are we going to do? We're going to tell you we're going to do it. Yeah. We've already been doing it, but now we're just going to come out and tell you because you're starting to catch on. So now this is how dumb people are. Yeah. This is how dumb we as a society are. So now we can all go back to sleep because the whole chemtrail thing has been exposed. But we never went back and said, you know what, you've been doing this for 30 or 40 years. Yeah. You've been manipulating the atmosphere. You've been pouring stuff out there that's manipulating our ability to think clearly and all the rest of it. But now that people are starting to acknowledge that it's going on, now we're just going to come right out and tell you we're going to appropriate some money to do it. So they come out and told you. Yeah. But
meanwhile, even like 5 years ago, you were still considered a lunatic for even using the term chemtrails.
Absolutely correct. I had it many times. I've been called, a tin hat or whatever they say. Yep. Many times, way back, starting to talk about chemtrails. Yep. One more point on the loss of the republic, and this is a little bit more vague, but I think if you think about it, it is recognizable. And this comes off of the New American publication. It was called On the Danger of Not Understanding Technology. And I think this comes into mind control through your through your cell phone, through your video games, through your smart TV. Oh, we all want to be able to walk in our house and tell our TV to turn the lights on and run the dishwasher. All these things have the ability to manipulate our ability to think clearly about the world around us. And by not understanding technology, one of the sentences I pulled out of this article, technology can vastly improve our lives, but if we choose not to question it for whatever reason, technology and those who control it will rule our lives, and not for the better.
Yeah.
And that article was found on New America. I thought that was awesome.
Well, there's so much to that when you look into it. I mean, we could look into the AI stuff and do a whole freaking 2 hours on that conversation, but it's so much simpler than that, to your point, that people don't even realize. Like, I'll go back and tie all of these things, the education, the drugs, everything, the mind control, everything they're talking about here. It's a phone issue. It's because we're all addicted to our phones. You want to know why we're sick? Because we're all on our phones. Like, that's why. The 5G thing, it's all bullshit. It's there to make us sick. Like, all of this shit ties back to the thing that we've talked about many, many, many times. Like, and it's the one thing that makes me frustrated with the conversations that we do have on here, because it's like, yeah, we're trying to, minimize tyranny. We're never going to stop it, but we're trying, like, our goal here is to get people awake to the idea that tyranny is going on here. And it's the idea of revitalizing a republic in this country. Like, that's our whole thing. But the one thing we've talked about time and time again is that there is a group of global elites, and you want to talk about conspiracies that are not conspiracies? These people have told you. They have put it out there. They want a population of 500,000 people on this earth. Do you realize how many of us they have to kill to make that reality? They've said it. They've said it again. They've said it again. They're not going back on their word. They literally want you dead. All of this shit, it's because they want us dead. Because their lives, these rich assholes who are so rich that, like, you're complaining about the wrong rich people. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you think you're talking about the rich guy down the road, like he's the problem? That's not the guy that you should be pissed at. Like, the guy you should be pissed at is the guy that you've never heard of, but he wants to kill billions of people. Like, that's the guy we should all agree to have an issue with. These are the people that are behind all of these initiatives. This weird AI takeover and the manipulation of our minds via social media and any other outlet of technology, the failing education system, the overabundance of drugs in our population, the terrible food, the ongoing wars, the poison in the skies, the poison in the water. It's all the same shit. And, like, yes, we have to have a good foundation here as a country to be able to fight that issue. I don't dispute that. But if you're looking at all of these things and saying, no, I don't think there's a big picture thing behind it. It just kind of is what it is. And, oh, it's just the way life is. Like, no, there is a reason that it exists. And until you wake up to that being reality, you're never going to pay attention enough what's going on, like, right around you in your community. And you have to be able to do both. You have to be able to see the big picture, and you have to be able to apply yourself on a small and local scale.
I think that's awesome. And one of the things I wanted to talk about just for a moment, because I know we're running up there already, which was a great hour. But, one of the things we've always attempted to do through the Fourth Box podcast, coming to you from the Buckman Tavern, where patrons gather, is not only point things out that we think people need to be thinking about and becoming involved with, but also try to come up with some solutions. So as we talk about restoring the Republic tonight, and we talk about many of the things that we think are influences as to why we lost the Republic, such as the bread and circuses and the education system, which has become the mind control propaganda system, and the drugs that are pouring into our, both illegal and legal drugs that our country takes in huge amounts, and the failing it, all of these things, the technology. What a solution would be that I would recommend, what everybody ought to try to do, 2, 3, 4 days a week at a minimum, Set your phone down. Take a walk outside. Take a walk in the woods. It's proven science. There are things out there in the woods that help you clear your mind. They help you put down the distractions, walk away, get some sunshine, become healthier. You'll get some exercise. You'll get some possibly cleaner air. You'll be in an environment that is much less stressful. You'll feel better coming out. Take a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Leave the phone home. Don't even bring it with you. And that will be a step that you can do to clear in your head, remove the clutter, and start to think about all the blessings that we have, the world around us, and how we want to make it better for upcoming generations.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. As you know, these problems are all so big and it becomes so overwhelming so fast and it can really wear on us. But we have to understand, like, the solutions are pretty small and we have to start with us. And that's why I made that mention, like, just before you said that. We have to see the big picture, but we have to start with us. You know, we talked about some of the things Jordan Peterson said, like, it's radical responsibility for ourselves. We have to take complete control of our own lives. The moment you do that, like the moment you step into the best version of yourself, you expand your ability to be a better person in your world. Whether it's 5 people in your circle or 50, like, start with the walk in the woods. I think that's so great. It can be so small. Put the phone down, get away from this stuff. We talk about it once a week. We sit down, we have these conversations. And some weeks I'm unprepared. Admittedly, tonight was one of them because there are times where I just don't look at what is going on because you can't do it all the time. It doesn't mean you're checked out and not engaged, but you have to take care of, like, yourself, and you have to be the best version of yourself because they want us weak. They want us stupid. They want us sick. They want those things. They rely on those things. They want uneducated voters. We talked about that early in the show. Yep. They need us to be the worst version of ourselves. So our best defense is to be better than they would ever allow us to be if they had complete and total control of our lives like they are trying to have.
That's super. Yep. Start with yourself. Make yourself better. Walk away from the distractions. Get outside. Get some exercise. Get some fresh air. Clear your head. And I think you have, as you described there, that was super. You become a better you, and you would then have the ability to influence those around you and have a clearer picture of the world that's going on around you. I think that's great. So even though you were unprepared, you had a lot of great comments tonight that fit well in with a couple of the topics that I wanted to talk about. And we have lost our republic. It's up to us to get it back, and we have to become first aware of what the world is changing, how the world is changing around us, and become a better you. And then we can have a better community and a better state and a better country.
Boom. Yeah, I think that's so good. That's what we're all about. Fourth box, baby.
Yeah, great. So I think we're about ready to wrap up. I do have a Bible verse tonight. I think it was a great discussion. Look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, the Bible verse for tonight: consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And that was James 1, verses 2 and 3.
Awesome. Great one. Well, thanks, Pops. Another great episode, as always. You guys know where to find us. We're here every Thursday at 6 p.m. Thanks for joining us once again. Until next week.
Stay vigilant.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.